genocide, the deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or group. So, My Hero Academia just ended its 7th season, and the common sentiment online seems to be that it was better than a lot of the previous seasons, partly because it was focused more on action and less on school events that nobody cares about, like the provisional hero licensing exams, or Class 1A versus the class of tertiary characters and forgotten character development, or the entirety of that school festival arc. Of course, this is all excluding Eri because Eri is best girl, and I will hear no arguments about that. Exhibit A.
I'm supposed to say trick or treat?
Exhibit B.
Sickness and in health.
Exhibit C.
Here, take these eggs I came.
I rest my case. And that's understandable. It's true, the action this season was fairly jam-packed with some bits and bobs of extra character development snuck in there in true My Hero Academia fashion, but honestly, if anything, I'd say this season was in a way more disappointing than a lot of those previous seasons for a couple of reasons I'll get into shortly. So going into this last arc, I was pretty invested in the outcome of most of the battles given all the mechanics involved, the extra build-up of Shigaraki's characters, or the supporting characters in the League of Villains like 𝑔𝑒𝓃𝒹𝒹𝒄𝒾𝒹𝒄𝒃, also known as Twice, and Himiko Toga, dealing with the entirety of that My Villain Academia arc, Deku's new sex powers, the mental split between Shigaraki and All For One, the return of some of the heroes and villains from the previous arcs, among other factors, and of course, Miyako's character arc. There's a lot of problems I have with the latest seasons, but for this video, I'm mainly going to focus on the absence of stakes for the heroes in most of the fights that them and the brave child soldiers of Hero High School engage in, and why maybe genocide might just be the perfect solution to all of this. My criticism is mainly going to be focused on the 7th season of the show with minor references to previous seasons. I do have various issues that are the previous seasons, but for now we'll only tackle the 7th season. So with all that preamble out of the way, let's begin. So, my hero suffers from a disease, a sickness, if you will, that I like to call the illusion of consequences. There's probably an actual literary term for this, but I'm lazy and my term's better, so I'm using it. Now, what I mean by this is that anytime a hero, or a child soldier in this case, engages in a fight with a villain, an event will occur that in the moment seems as if it will massively impact them and completely change the state of the battlefield. The villain will seemingly gain some ground, but ultimately the event will be completely ignored, downplayed, or resolved within a few episodes, or even a few scenes, and the hero, or child soldiers in this case, will ultimately succeed as the show pretends as if that event is ever significant. What I just said is just a really convoluted way of saying that there is no adequate stakes in the fights. So to understand what I mean, we'll look at some of the battles that happen this season, how they play out, what the result is by the end of the fights. So, to set the stage, All Might and the rest of the pro heroes decide that the best way to fight the villains would be to use Monoma to copy Kurogiru's warp gate quirk and use it to transport the villains and the heroes to 5 separate locations all across the country, where each villain will be matched up to fight the heroes most suited to defeating them. For example, you've got Deku vs Shigaraki, Nabi vs Todoroki, Mineta vs HR, and so on and so forth. Now, I won't cover every single fight, just some specific ones that I'd like to talk about. Also, spoiler alert for the events of Season 7. We'll start off with Coffin in the Sky, where you have Mirko, the big three, Best Genius, Edgeshot, Bakugo, Monoma, Aizawa, and Deku, who hasn't arrived yet, set to fight Shigaraki. So Monoma plagiarizes Aizawa's quirk, and together they cancel Shigaraki by bringing up his controversial tweets about Mirko from 2016, but Shigaraki's body begins to morph and enlarge, sprouting numerous fingers in order to accommodate the multiple quirks housed within his body, which serves as further proof of the quirk singularity doomsday theory. Naturally, Shigaraki proceeds to finger Mirko, without her consent by the way, which causes her prosthetic arm and leg to break. A bit weird that a force that disintegrates her metallic arm and leg doesn't cause any incapacitating physical injury to the rest of her furry bits, but okay. Maybe she's just fighting through the pain. She's a strong lady after all. Anyway, she grabs another set of prosthetics from underneath the coffin, reattaches them, and then goes back into the battle. Oh yeah, and the shipping community gets more material for the ever-growing library of My Hero Academia fanfiction. As the fight continues, you have Bakugo, who dies, we'll discuss that later, and Shigaraki battles the other heroes. He fights Mirko again, which results in her losing a non-prosthetic arm, Aizawa style. She then borrows some threads from Best Genius, charges towards him, gives him a lunar rush as payback for the unsolicited fingering, and we get possibly the most important scene in the history of this show. This right here is what we call absolute cinema. Later on in the fight, she charges him again and gets knocked out by him. Over on Okuto Island, you've got Gang Oka, some pro heroes, Deku, Uraraka, and Asui.
I told you to call me Sue.
Okay, Sue. And they're fighting Toga, some Nomus, and escaped criminals from the breakouts conducted by Alpha One in Season 6. We see a familiar face, Moonfish, who hasn't had much to eat since the breakout and wasn't really a big fan of the vegetarian diet over at Tartarus. Lucky for him, some no-name pro heroes and sidekicks avail themselves and he's able to secure them and start off the fight with a light snack. Gang Oka luckily only gets stabbed through his forearm, so he's still good to go. We then move on to the fight between Toga, Deku, 𝑔𝑒𝓃𝒹𝒄𝒻, and Sue. Long story short, Toga confesses her feelings to Deku. He shoots her down just because she wants to stab him and drink his blood, I guess. You can't afford to be that picky in this economy, Deku. I mean, the name of the episode is inflation. I guess it's on that Sigma grind set. Toga ends up stabbing 𝑔𝑒𝓃𝒹𝒄𝒻 in her shoulder before she is rescued by Sue, and Deku leaves the fight to go deal with Shigaraki as the entire plan hinges on his presence, and he lets the women deal with his crazy wannabe girlfriend. We move over to Kamino Ward, where we're shown Dabi and Nomu fighting against Shoto, Ida, Endeavor's sidekicks, and some pro heroes. Already a bunch of heroes have apparently died, presumably the spiky boy Nomu and the intense heat from Dabi's flames. All that's left for Dabi to fight is his brother, who says, and Endeavor's sidekicks who all have heat-related quirks that allow them to survive the battle for a lot longer than other heroes might. Now, Ida and the pro heroes fight the spiky boy Nomu, while Endeavor's sidekicks do almost nothing the entirety of this fight. The mum uses his bandages to alter the trajectory of the flames so they don't burn him, and the other two just act as bystanders while Icy Hot fights his brother. I guess a good excuse for this is that the intensity of Dabi's flames is enough to even burn his brother Shoto, so they would likely burn up if they got anywhere near him. But it still would have been nice to see them have some level of useful participation in the fight, otherwise why are they even here? I take great issue also with what happens later. The sidekicks all pass out in front of Shoto due to the inability to withstand the flames anymore, after which Dabi fires off a massive attack towards Shoto that spreads not only towards him, but also envelops the near surrounding. That attack lasts for at least 10 seconds before Shoto uses his new technique, Flash Fire Fist Phosphor, to neutralize his brother and extinguish the surrounding heat. During those 10 seconds, Shoto didn't try to get any of the passed out sidekicks out of the vicinity, and the heat only got more turned up since they passed out, so there's no way they just got up and escaped in the nick of time. Those sidekicks must be absolutely evaporated after being subjected to those flames for that long. The problem is, they're not. All of them are just fine. It's only once Dabi mimics Todoroki's technique and turns his flames back on that two of them seemingly perish by burning alive. For some reason, Green Fire Lady is perfectly fine despite her only quirk being shown to be flame hair and some degree of heat resistance, which would not be enough to survive flames that were hot enough to melt statues, the ground, and burn up Shoto while he was using his technique specifically made to neutralize the heat from those flames.
This is so hot, even I'm getting burned.
How the heck is she not dead? I'll tell you why. It's because they need the fight to be perceived as dangerous, so they need to kill off or seriously injure some characters, but obviously not the characters we know or care about, because that would constitute stakes, and we can't have that in the My Hero universe. So instead, we'll just kill off some side characters who the audience can't even remember the names of. I mean, seriously. I challenge anyone watching this to even remember who the name of the mummy is without googling it. You can't, because you probably didn't even remember the name of Endeavor's main sidekick. It was Moe Kamaji. Her hero name was Burnin, and you could have killed her off. It would have been fine. This is a really minor example of the illusion of consequences. We'll get to the big ones later. Now, as a side note, I would like to briefly mention a couple of things I liked about this fight. The little whoosh text that comes up as Dabi slowly flies into the sky in tandem with the somber piano music in the background is pretty neat, and does make it really feel like a manga come to life. A lot of the animation is good. I like the burning off of Dabi's own lips and his skin to reveal the muscle layer underneath as he turns up the heat of his flames, the melting of all-made statue to signify how high the temperature is, the bright blue light emanating from Dabi's mouth and eyes, which make it look as if he's also burning up on the inside, not just physically but also emotionally. It also makes it feel like the hatred for Endeavor is coming from deep inside him. The animation of the flames themselves, with how large they are and how much they illuminate everything, including the cracks in between the rocks he walks on, despite it being nighttime, really makes them look as if they're alive and dangerous. I like Dabi's animalistic movements as he gets down on all fours to stretch a bit before lunging at his brother, which makes it look as though he's not really relying on any sort of strategy or attack pattern and is moving based on pure instinct, like his brain has been so burned up by his own flames at this point that he can't even think straight. It really helps to drive home what Dr. Eggman said about him.
The only thing keeping him among the living was his bitter rage.
And of course, the voice acting by Dabi in both the sub and the dub is quite excellent. Personally, I prefer the dub.
You had every advantage! You're a spoiled little brat who never bothered to reach his full potential! I should know and never told you that to your face! A family should be honest, right? They never amount to anything in this world! Kids! Bye!
There's a lot of pain, hatred, sadness, determination that he has in this fight, and that all comes across really well. Credits to Hiroshimano, and I know I'm going to butcher this, Jason Liebrecht, who did his sub and dub voices respectively. There's a lot more I could say about this fight, but we'll leave that for another video so it's not to distract from the main point I'm trying to make in this video. The next battle zone is Gunga Villa, where you have All For One fighting Endeavor, Hawks, Genderbend Raven, also known as Tokoyami, and Earphone Jack. Now before I explain the fight, let me just say that I'm really not a fan of how we have an intelligent villain with hundreds of quirks that's been alive for decades, and the most creative way we can have him use his powers are morphing his arm into a shield, morphing his arm into a giant laser cannon, morphing his arm into a bunch of long spikes, using his arms to make shockwaves and shields, using his arms to make energy blasts, and a bunch of other boring stuff you've seen 1,000 times. It would be interesting to see an actual, unconventional use of this guy's multiple abilities for once, instead of doing spring-like limbs, plus air cannon, plus moonwalk, plus gooning arm for the millionth time in order to form the ultimate Kuma. I mean, come on, you tell me that in the decades that this guy's been alive, he's never picked up shape-shifting, or time travel, or teleportation, or intangibility, or telekinesis, or mind control like Shinso, or even invisibility. Anyway, aside from that, a quick fight happens which ends up with earphone Jack losing an ear, but not a hand, so she can still jack off no problem, and Hawks getting an acupuncture. Very convenient for him that the spikes only end up piercing his wings and not any part of his torso, because All Fun is apparently terrible at aiming his bloody attacks, but alright. Endeavor on the other hand also gets spiked through his arm, so he tears it off, Aizawa style, and proceeds to generate a flame arm, after which he beats up All For One and incinerates him in the sky, which all looks pretty cool. Hawks and Endeavor are two other main examples of the illusion of consequences. Hawks gets penetrated and Endeavor gets unarmed. Both of those things seem like they will at least partially hinder them or slow them down a bit, but nope. They're able to find an immediate solution to the hindrance and keep going on like nothing's happened. Again, this is just a minor example of this phenomenon, but we'll get to more egregious examples later. After the fight, All For One uses a modified version of the Quark Erasing Bullet to activate Ares' Quark, which allows him to regenerate every time he takes damage by rewinding him to the point of childhood. So for now, he's temporarily unkillable as opposed to permanently unkillable like everyone else he's fighting. We'll call this new man All For Young. Meanwhile, over at Jaku Hospital, you have a race war going on between the heteromorphs and honestly nobody, because this plot point came out of nowhere and would have been better addressed if it was presented a lot earlier in the show. But in summary, Tentacle solves racism. Spinner, the supreme leader of the heteromorphs, eventually manages to free 𝑔𝑒𝓃𝒹𝒄, who uses his warp gate quirk to transport various individuals across different locations of the different battlefields. He moves Dabi to Gunga Villa and opens up a warp gate to Toga, who drinks some of Twice's saved up blood, transforms into him and uses his quirk to send out Sadman's death parade to Gunga Villa and Coffin in the sky. Sue and Uraraka follow her to Gunga. Aizawa and Monoma are disrupted by the clones. Their line of sight to Shigaraki is obscured. They blink, Shigaraki gives birth to himself. Lady Nagant, who really should have died from the explosion of, her entire bloody body, shoots his hands and Deku gets him out of the coffin to fight him on the ground in order to prevent decay from breaching his friends if it's activated. Going back to Gunga Villa, you've got All For Young, Toga's Infinite Army, Dabi, and some Nomu fighting against Endeavor, some UA students, and some pro heroes. Some Shiketsu students show up, so you've got the Last Airbender, Kami, who has some interesting dialogue, to say the least.
What the Sigma?
Skibbity Fortnite! Have you never been a Sigma rizzing up a Flowberry Burst yacht in Reckless Railways?
Is Baby Grunk the new Drip King, or is he just getting rizzed up by Livy?
What the hell are you talking about?
Bigfoot, Seiji, remind me, what was his quirk again?
He can reshape flesh by massaging it.
Oh, right. Massages his meat and lets Kami ride it into battle, and some others. Now, the Last Airbender deals with Toga's doubles by destroying them in tornadoes in large groups. Tokoyami goes
Azarath Metrion Synthos!
Transforms into a super bird due to the cloud cover and the wind toning down Dabi's flames. Endeavor deals with Dabi, the ground troops deal with Toga's infinitely multiplying doubles, and All For Young deals with everyone else. Gigantomachia wakes up, Shinso mind controls him, and both him and Mount Lady head over to Gunga Villa to fight All For Young with Shinso and Kirishima on the back of Makia. Speaking of Mount Lady, I'd like to mount that lady. Now, once they arrive at Gunga, Makia tries to kill All For Young because apparently he's pissed off that All For Young keeps abandoning him. All For Young could quickly fly off and tell Makia that he's been in prison thanks to the heroes and that they're the ones who've been preventing him from seeing him and thus redirect Makia's outreach towards them, but instead, he keeps quiet and lets Tokoyami, Mount Lady, Gigantomachia, and the Last Airbender and Hawks keep pounding him. Then he does the thing. The illusion of consequences. He bites off Mount Lady's torso, doesn't kill her obviously. He blasts Makia's torso, doesn't kill him obviously. He blasts away Tokoyami and Hawks, doesn't kill them obviously. And then releases a final blast that knocks out everyone near him on the battlefield, doesn't kill them obviously. Once everyone is knocked out, instead of All For Young taking this opportunity to finally kill everyone in his sight by using those spiky bits, or one of those lasers, or those arm-eating thingamajigs, he instead takes Hawks' quarks and flies off, and we're meant to take this as some kind of big win for All For Young and a loss for the heroes. I know the excuse is going to be that his body is rewinding, that he needs to get to Shigaraki quickly and that's why he takes fierce wings, but, he He could also just take fierce wings, fly into the sky, laser everyone to death from above because they're all unconscious anyway in order to prevent them from following him, and then fly away. Are you seriously telling me that a bunch of pro heroes and students with only provisional licenses went toe-to-toe with an apparently intelligent 100-year-old man with super regeneration and multiple quirks, the most dangerous and most powerful villain in the history of humanity, and the only consequence of that is not the death of a hero, not a permanent injury like paralysis or blindness, not even the death of a first-year student with a provisional hero license. It's that Hawks turns into Walks without even getting a scar on his body. The show could have taken this as an easy opportunity to kill off a lot of the side characters we've come to know, like Hawks, who honestly should have died in his fight with Darby, or Mount Lady, who also should have died in her first brawl with Makia back in season 6. 𝑔𝑒𝓃𝒹𝒄𝒻 could have had his quirk taken. At least that would have actually been like losing a close companion, or maybe even a brother to him. Heck, it could have been Mineta, but instead, Hawks just loses his wings and everyone else is hunky-dory. Moving over to Toga, so the last airbender and the other heroes fighting 𝑔𝑒𝓃𝒹𝒄𝒻 are all unconscious and Hawks is quirkless. The earthbending cat girl, I think her name is Pixie Bob, and Tiger are overwhelmed by the clones and captured, confirming that Toga is Trump supporter.
Grab him by the...
Anyway, Sue is captured and the only person who seems to be escaping and conversing with Toga is Uraraka. Now, why the heck don't the clones kill all the heroes they've captured? For some reason, they capture them and the camera just cuts away like it's the long night episode of Game of Thrones. There was literally no one stopping these clones from multiplying endlessly aside from Uraraka, who takes quite a while to chat up Toga before she levels up and floats away all the clones. What the heck is happening to the captured heroes between the time that they are captured and the time that they are freed by the floating clones? I'll tell you what's happening. They're being protected by the natural plot armor of being off screen. And you can't make the argument that they are still fighting. They're being overwhelmed by hundreds upon hundreds of clones. Kamui, Woods, and Sue are literally just T-posing in the middle of the army. The army at some point grows so large that Toga calls it Sad Man's Legion. They should all be dead at this point. Meanwhile, Toga and Uraraka have some much needed girl talk. Toga uses her love language, which is acts of service via stabbing, to let Uraraka know that she loves her, and Uraraka goes plus ultra and uses her love language, which is words of affirmation and physical touch, to let Toga know that she loves her too. She floats every one of the clones away, and what do you know? All the characters that are captured by the clones are just fine. Uraraka then convinces Toga that she's cute. They fall to the ground. Toga ingests Uraraka's blood, turns into her, and gives her a blood transfusion, which harkens back to when Twice did the same thing for her back in the My Villain Academia arc. She sews her up, and she dies, saying she's a normal girl with the cutest smile in the world. The conversation that they have is pretty emotional. There's a lot of nice imagery, and the voice acting is pretty good. But we'll save the in-depth analysis of this for probably another video. For now, I'll just focus on the fight that takes place and the results of it by the end. So, a character with an infinite army goes into a fight against a bunch of pro heroes and students. She captures most of them, but the only person she manages to kill by the end of the fight is herself. That's the most complicated suicide I've ever seen!
It's just dumb!
It's just suicide with extra steps. Anyway, going back to 𝑔𝑒𝓃𝒹𝒄𝒻, he leaves Gunga Villa and uses his fierce wings. Well, I guess they're not as big as fierce as they once were, so we'll call them flaccid wings. He uses flaccid wings to head over to Coffin in the sky. He encounters All Might in his path, who turns into Iron Might, and begins to fight 𝑔𝑒𝓃𝒹𝒄𝒻. It's explained that he got the suit from Melissa and David Shields, who were present in the first My Hero Academia movie titled Two Heroes. And personally, I'm not a fan of this loose cannon approach to the movies, where we grab and reference certain elements of the movies while at the same time completely ignoring some of the obvious questions and plot issues that would arise if the movies were actually considered canon. Like the fact that All Might's first unconfirmed sidekick was an American scientist by the name of David Shields according to the movies, but in the show, Sun Night-Eye was also All Might's former sidekick in Japan, and his superfan was obsessed with everything about him, never even referenced him. Or the fact that David Shields is still alive and might be able to build another quirk amplification helmet based on his previous schematics. Anyway, ignoring all of that, I'm also not a fan of the color scheme of the suit. All Might's suits have always been flashy with bright colors like red, yellow, and blue throughout his years as a hero. So if he was to ask for a suit, he would probably ask for it to have similar bright colors to his actual superhero suit. But maybe it was a rush job and there wasn't enough time for that. It's just a minor complaint. The fight itself is rather enjoyable. It's cool to see All Might incorporate the movesets of all of his students into the fighting style he uses, like Black Whip with the K-bolts, Charge Bolt via the use of electricity, Cellophane by binding him, Sugarman with the rocket boots, Pinky with the super acid injection, and Deku's One for All with the shoot style. I did notice that there's a clear absence of a certain character's sticky balls for some reason. Apparently All Might happens to love some students more than others. You know, Ame should have just grabbed All For Young's balls, and that could have been Mineta's moveset. Activate sexual harassment. Also, what the heck is an impure beam? I just found that funny for some reason. Anyway, the season ends in the middle of the fight with All Might saying,
That's it. Come on, Classy. Lend me your strength.
followed by a couple of shots of the other fight still taking place. Also, this is just a pet peeve, but I don't know why the episode called I Am Here is only the episode where All Might actually arrives and says those words, with the rest of the episode being focused on the Todoroki family and not the one where he fights All For One in the finale. You could have just called Endeavor's episode The Hellish Todoroki Family Part 3 and swapped out the Battle Without a Quirk title for the finale with I Am Here. Anyway, that wraps up all the fights in Season 7 that I mainly want to talk about for this video. So, let's see what we have by the end of this. At this point in time, by the end of Season 7, all of the members of the League of Villains have been defeated, apart from Shigaraki, and All For Young is fighting All Might as his body deteriorates towards the point of vanishing out of existence and presumably All Might's death, which really should have happened 3 seasons ago, but okay. Seriously though, if All Might doesn't die in this fight due to the subversion of the future or some nonsense like that, it's gonna be such a waste. But, assuming All Might does die, and Deku beats Shigaraki with the power of friendship, which I would really despise honestly, that would mean that the biggest and most dangerous battle in the history of My Hero Academia will end without a single main or a side character dying or experiencing any permanent damage. And by permanent damage I mean something unfixable like blindness or paralysis. I do not count a character losing a limb that is immediately replaced by a robot limb and thus doesn't stop them from actually doing any superhero activity whatsoever. Looking at you, Mirko, Aizawa, and Endeavor. Now that alone isn't really a problem. You don't necessarily need character deaths to show the stakes of your fights. That can also be achieved in other ways, obviously. But the problem I have with My Hero is that it chooses to convey stakes by pretending that the characters are in any sort of danger or risk of death in any of the fights that they engage in, either by giving them possible loss that they're able to easily overcome, or minor consequences that are portrayed as much more impactful than they actually are in the grand scheme of the battle. And ultimately, that's my main point. The heroes we know don't beat the villains because they put up a better fight than them. They beat them because they're utterly incompetent in battle as a result of the show not being willing to risk the lives of any of the main characters or side characters or even most of the tertiary characters. The show tries to trick you into thinking that the battle has any actual stakes by pretending as if events like Hawks getting his quirk taken, Toga getting an infinite army that engulfs the entire battlefield, Dabi's flames being so hot that they melt anything they touch, or All For One regenerating and getting all his powers back are going to have like a massive impact on the state of the battlefield, and that the heroes are going to be in serious danger due to these events, while in reality, all these things are just minor inconveniences that the heroes are able to quickly deal with. Toga dying isn't some kind of big loss for the villains or even a big win for the heroes, because she couldn't even kill any recognizable characters she had captured despite having an infinite army. Hawks losing his wings isn't some kind of big loss for the heroes, considering he was so tired and beaten up at that point that there was no chance of him ever following All For Young. And it isn't a big gain for the villains either, because the extra speed that All For Young gets through fierce wings is immediately countered by running into Iron Might along his path. Dabi's insanely hot flames aren't an actual life-threatening danger to Shoto, his family, or even Endeavor's main sidekick, even though they really should be. They just pretend as if they are and find immediate solutions to them before they're able to cause any serious injury. All For One can't kill any of the pro heroes or students that we know. All he can do is try to kill a man that should have died 4 seasons ago, as it rewinds the point of childhood before ever even getting to Shigaraki. Miko can be damaged in a way that will actually stop her from fighting permanently. Deku isn't ever gonna kill Shigaraki. Shigaraki can't kill anyone in Coffin in the Sky because that's all composed of characters we know. Just like he couldn't kill any pre-existing recognizable characters and use decay after awakening for the first time with his incomplete body back in Season 6. And unfortunately, Bakugo can't stay dead for even a single episode before they sew him up in plot armor and try to drag his corpse back to life in literally the next episode. Now these little tricks, like Toga's death and Hawks' loss of Quirk, they're just meant to make you feel as if they're stakes, when in reality, way more of the people involved in this fight should have ended up dead or severely maimed. And this is where genocide comes in. Now, as we all know, the only problem with Attack on Titan's ending was Eren Yeager. If he had just killed the remaining 20% of the population of Earth, then the Island Devils would have lived their lives on Paradis, happily ever after, and war would have been eradicated, it would have been over. That's clearly the message that Sayama intended for us to take home by the end. If you're gonna do a genocide, then you've gotta do it the right way, no half measures. Am I right? Anyway, jokes aside, when I say that My Hero needs a genocide, what I just mean is that it needs more permanent consequences to its fights. I'm aware that the show is mostly PG.
This is how loud and energetic you can be.
Ooh, we're rock a super fine body. You've got some pretty big boobs, Sue. Hey, come on in, girl. I've got so much to show you. She wants to know everything about my balls. If she wants to write an article about my sticky balls, I'll give her an all-access pass.
You don't have to worry about this stuff.
Midnight.
powers of rape?
Gotta love those familial bonds. What you picked today could be your code name for life. All these plus ultra moments are oh so stimulating. This sort of talk is incredibly naive, my boys. That turns me on. Such youthful vigor.
FBI, open up!
Mostly. It isn't really one to take huge risks, and despite all the previous battles we've had, the only heroes that have had any substantial character development that have died so far in previous seasons are Sanaitai and the BDSM hero.
If I see someone running away from me and scream, my sadistic siding's so bad that I can't sit still.
Also known as Miss Midnight. Despite that, I thought that with the conclusion of the story and this being the final battle that basically determines the future of the world in universe, that they'd at least have the balls to actually kill off some of the heroes and show the stakes of the battle. Heck, they could have even copped out and killed Sugarman, Cellophane, Tentacle, Anyvoice, Tailman, Invisible, or any of the students in Class 1B. The fact that I had to use their superhero names because I genuinely could not remember any of their names, and neither could you, proves that there's clearly favorites when it comes to receiving screen time, which I'm not opposed to. It's a big cast and it's difficult to juggle that many characters, which is why you could have taken this as an easy opportunity to kill off some of those side characters that no one gives a damn about. They're all kids that we've seen since the first season, and even though the development hasn't been stellar, their deaths would have hit hard, and the audience would have gotten the message that this is the ultimate fight and that their favorite characters might actually be in danger. I know we're yet to see Sugarman, Cellophane, Tailman, Invisible, and Can't Stop Twinkling fight, but come on, you know they're not dying anytime soon. And they're not gonna die. As for the pro heroes, Hawks and Mount Lady should have been easy kills. Honestly, if it were up to me, I'd go full on Thanos and kill off half of Class 1A, half of Class 1B, a lot of the pro heroes, pretty much all the Pussycats, the Dragon Lady, Mount Lady, Kamino Woods, etc. It would have been tough, but it would have also been incredibly meaningful, and it's a shame that my hero decided to still play it safe this late in the show. So those are my general thoughts on certain issues I had with My Hero Academia's latest season. You can watch my other video where I talk about my thoughts on Bakugo's death, if you're curious about my thoughts on that. If there's any fights that I haven't mentioned, it's either because I didn't have much to say about them, or the fights are incomplete and I'm waiting for them to be completed first before I'm able to draw a conclusion. Or I didn't really have much of a problem with the fights. Thanks for watching my video. Please like and subscribe if you can, and let me know what you think about everything I mentioned in this video. This is my first video, so I apologize for the bad audio and any editing mistakes that I made. I do want to clarify that I still do enjoy a lot of aspects of My Hero Academia, like the entire Todoroki family plotline, the conclusion of Toga and Twice's stories, the redemption of Gentle Criminal, the fact that it's a 7-season story that actually took 7 years to come to conclusion, which is pretty rare for anime, looking at you, Attack on Titan, and several other things that, who knows, I might make videos on in the future. I'm just really disappointed to see the story that executed so many of those great arcs still choose to go in such a reasonably predictable and safe direction for its conclusion. Once again, thanks for watching, and we'll see what Season 8, which is also the final season, has to offer. Now leave me alone.